All right, everybody. I'd like to say thank you so much, Facebook family, for all the support y'all been giving me. And everybody saying, man, when is you going to make a book? Man, you're doing all this history about the city. You're doing all the history about the black community, the television stations. When are you going to do some history about Robert Boo Lee Williams? And when can we expect the book to come out, man? Because you got so much information. And it's so exciting. And all I can say, yes, I have lived an exciting life, y'all. Man, but let's take it back to the beginning, Robert Boo Lee Williams. March the 19th, 1948, 3rd Ward. My mother, Miss Lillian Ames Williams. My father, Robert Leon Williams, Sr. The place, 3rd Ward, over there at 3816 Cobb Street. And Cobb Street is a street right behind Towester and Cleburne. You might can say Sampson. And it only ran from Holman to Rosewood. And what can I say, man? I was a bad little boy. You can ask some of the people that knew me, like Carolyn Land, Devon, Marvin Neal, Jerry Shepard. These are the people that knew me when I lived in my neighborhood and how bad I was, man. And what can I say about my cousin, Hestel Godfrey, better known as Lulu, Hestel Harvey? Man, they could tell you I was a bad kid. But one thing about being in 3rd Ward that saved me was 3 things that saved me, 3 places. First of all, the most number 1 spot was the YMCA, and it meant just what it meant. Young Christian Men Association. Young Men Christian Association. And it did put some spiritual life into my life because I was bad, man. At 4 years old, I hadn't even started kindergarten yet, and I cussed out the ice cream man. Cussed him out all down the street, man, on a Sunday afternoon after people came from church, man. And everybody, what's wrong with Boo? Because that was my name, Boo, before it got to be Boo Lee. My mother named me Boo. My nickname was Boo. And everybody coming out, what's wrong with Boo? I don't know. Boo out here hollering and cussing. What is wrong with him? And then find out later on, cussing out the ice cream man because he wouldn't stop at my house. He stopped, but he kept going. But anyway, that was some of the bad things that I done. And what can I say about the YMCA? I was the only little kid that got his hand caught in the soda water machine, trying to steal some cups. But one thing about it, the 3 places that helped me, like I say, was the YMCA. We call it the Y. And most of all, Jefferson Stadium, where they played all the high school football games. Where they also played, TSU played at the stadium. And during my birthday time, during March, TSU would have the TSU relays. I worked at Jefferson Stadium. I lived in Jefferson Stadium. It was 3 places you're going to find me. Either at the Y, Jefferson Stadium, or TSU. Now, one thing about TSU, yes, I used to go over to TSU because we stayed right around the corner from TSU. And what can I say, man? Over at TSU, I would go in there and shoot pool because I learned how to shoot pool at the YMCA with Jerry Shepard, Marvin Neal, and Lawrence Williams. We all stayed at, and Will Jones, we all stayed at that Y every day. From the time we got out of school to the time the Y closed, I think the Y used to close, around 8 o'clock. We stayed there after school. And what can I say about Jefferson Stadium? When I first started, we only had 3 black schools, Yates, Wheatley, and Booker T. Washington. But when I was getting paid 50 cents a game, we had 5 black high schools. They added 2 more high schools in 1958, in September. They added Cashmere and Worthing. And what can I say about working around coaches? Let's start with the first coach over there at Booker T. Washington, where I worked with, was Coach Sims. And then I worked with Coach Patterson, of course. I worked with him more than I worked with any other coaches. Because, see, the black schools only played through the week. They couldn't play on the weekend because the white kids played then. And what can I say about Coach Frank Walker over there at Phyllis Wheatley? And what can I say about Cashmere coach, Coach Billy Matthews? And what can I say about Worthing coach, which was my best friend, who I had been knowing since the 3rd grade, John Tankersley, working around his father, which was Coach John Tankersley, Sr. I learned how to make money, and I learned how to be able to work with people and find out that I did have a personality under this bad person that I used to be as a kid as Boo. And they paid us 50 cents a game. And what can I say? That was a lot of money, because plate lunches didn't cost but 25 cents. And when you went to school and had a plate lunch, man, you was living high on the hog, buddy. Trust me, you was. And I would have an extra 25 cents after I get through with plate lunches coming out of school. Didn't have to worry about no friends hanging around me. They waiting on Boo Lee. Well, it was Boo. They waiting on Boo to get out of school. We going to Blackshear Elementary School, y'all, when I start working at Jefferson Stadium. And why they waiting on Boo? Because Boo always had the money. And I worked because I wanted to have my own money. And yes, I paid dearly for that. Because I would not only catch whoopings at home for being a bad boy, but what can I say? I caught a lot of whoopings at school for not bringing in my homework. Man, these are people that they'll tell you this. I'm not lying. Ask John Tankersley. Ask Grady Johnson. Ask Walter Richards. They'll tell you, man, I used to catch whoopings every day at school. Man, I wasn't worried about no whoopings at school because I got used to it. And why I was catching whoopings? Because I wasn't doing my homework. Why I wasn't doing my homework? Because I was out there at Jefferson Stadium working the football games. And why my mother didn't make me do my homework? Because I was lying to her, telling her I did all my homework in school. And that's a damn lie. I didn't do no homework in school. But then I caught another butt whooping when card day came around. Yes. But if I had to do it all over again, yes, I'd do it all over again, because it taught me how to make money and how to work with the public like I'm doing now. And when working around the stadium and working around these great coaches, and then 2 years later, 1960, the Houston Oilers came to town. And this is what the book I think I'm going to have to write first, because I know this is a real history of a book, because this is a book that can go all over the world, because this was the beginning of the AFL, and that's the American Football League. Started with Mr. Lamar Hunt of the Dallas Texans and Mr. Bud Adams, his good friend, the Houston Oilers. And another friend that I didn't really know until later on, his name was Ralph Wilson, and he was the owner of the Buffalo Bills. Man, this is what the history is right here, man, because I watched this AFL grow. I watched them grow to where they made the NFL take them in. Because if the NFL didn't take them in, they was going to take the NFL out. Trust me, they was, because they had the money. And Mr. Lamar Hunt of the Dallas Texans, who later on moved to Kansas City. But the historical part about it, because I worked the last game of 1962 championship game at Jefferson Stadium, where the Houston Oilers played the Dallas Texans. And that was the last game before Mr. Lamar Hunt took his team to Kansas City and changed the name to the Kansas City Chiefs. Man, what an excitement, man. This is what it's all about right here to me. You know, the knowing the history that I did was part of the AFL. That's now part of the NFL. That's why people say, man, I see you wear all these sports jerseys, because I was raised around sports. From football to baseball. Yeah, I used to hang around TSU because baseball season would come around. Yeah, I hang around TSU because that's where I met Gerald Valier brother called Rock. Where I met the guy named Galley who took me up under his arm. He was the trainer for TSU. You know, all of this is part of history, man. And what can I say about Galley? He also introduced me and let me work around the track team, which was Coach Stan Wright, who used to have the TSU relays over there at Jefferson Stadium. Been around good people who ran for Texas Southern, such as Major Adams. I even worked for Major Adams. And you say, who is Major Adams? That's Wanda Adams. That's Yolanda Adams' father. Yolanda Adams is the great gospel singer. That's her father, Major Adams. I worked for him later on when he graduated out of school. And I worked around TSU to watch other people who came out of TSU start teaching over at Jack Yates, such as Mr. Thaddeus Bush, Mr. Erskine Mohead, Mr. Freddie Morrow. All them people, I was going around TSU when they were going around TSU, and they got to be teachers over at Jack Yates. Some of them was my teachers. But back to what my book going to be about is the AFL and how they merged in and how they got started. I was with them when they got started as a little kid, 12 years old, 1960. And what happened on that deal was that the AFL was a football league, kind of like the USFL, who they started like trying to be like the AFL. But the AFL had a lot of money. The AFL teams that got started, some of them, the owners couldn't stay in business. Then but 3 owners stay in business. The rest of them, they fold up. Let's start it from the beginning. Mr. Lamar Hunt over there at the Dallas Texans, who later on moved to Kansas City. Mr. Bud Adams, who started here in Houston, Oilers, and he later on, everybody know, moved to Tennessee. And Mr. Ralph Wilson, who stayed in Buffalo till he sold his team out not too long ago. The other teams that couldn't hold out was the Boston Patriots, who left Boston and moved to New England. The New York Titans, who left New York and moved outside to on the other side of New Jersey and became the New York Jets. The Los Angeles Chargers, who left Los Angeles, went to San Diego, now they back in LA because that's where they started at. The Oakland Raiders, who stayed in Oakland, and the owner of the Oakland Raiders was Al Davis' mother. Al Davis was the commissioner of the league. And that's why I'm a big Raiders fan, y'all. I'm a big Raiders and Kansas City fan, and I'm going to be that till the day I leave here because it's so much good memories with those teams. And I worked as a kid around them. And how the AFL rule was when they started this league in 1960, that every home team furnished the visiting team with a water boy. And I was the water boy for the Houston Oilers. The water boy, in other words, he helped the trainer. That means every Saturday morning I had to get up and go to Jefferson Stadium. And they would leave the door open for me. Go in there and wash all the jerseys that they practice in on Friday. They'll bring them and fly them in Saturday morning and drop them off at Jefferson Stadium. And I didn't do the job by myself, so the guy who hired me, and he asked me to work, was a guy named Bobby Brown. He was the Houston Oilers trainer. This was his responsibility to make sure that the visiting team get a water boy. And Bobby Brown wanted a water boy that he knew, that knew something about the stadium. Because I knew more about the stadium than he did. Because I was working at the stadium before the Oilers got there. And Bobby Brown told me that he'll pay me $10, but I need some help. So then I got with a friend of mine. I had started going to Miller Junior High School. I got with a friend of mine named Curtis Boyd, and asked Curtis could he come and start helping me, and I pay him $5 after every game that we play, that we work. And me and Curtis started working, and the job started Saturday morning. We watched all of the football jerseys that they practiced out of that Friday, and put them in the big old duffel bag so they'll go. So when we load the truck up to go to Hobby Airport after the game, they would have these clean jerseys to practice with for Monday morning. You know, when I started working for the Houston Oilers, when they first came to town, I was the first water boy that they ever had, that they hired. And I'd like to thank Mr. Bobby Brown for giving me that opportunity. And he came to me and asked me about the job because my cousin, John Harvey, was supposed to get the job, but he was going to college and he had just started going to Wiley College, so he couldn't do it. And only somebody that he referred Bobby Brown to was me, because I knew more about the stadium. And I knew how to work around the coaches because I already had 2 years worth of experience. I started working when the Houston Oilers came to town. It was the football season of 1960. They played the first championship game here in Houston, and the Houston Oilers won that championship, which was the last and the first time Houston ever won a championship game here in Houston. And it was in Third Ward at Jefferson Stadium. The football season was 1960, and they played the Los Angeles Chargers. And what was so bad about it, because every time I had to go over to the Houston Oilers side, you know, I ain't but 12 years old, man. I would call everybody Mister, because that's the way we were raised up, Mr., uncles, and aunties. We didn't call adults by their first name. We gave them that respect. And I could see the time that I would go over there by the Oilers side, and some of the Oilers be in the dressing room, and such as Mr. Blanda. Everybody called him Mr. Blanda. Even Billy Cannon was a Heisman Trophy winner at that time for LSU. He used to call him Mr. Blanda. Even the football coach every once in a while was Lou Rinkus, was the first football coach. He would sometimes call him Mr. Blanda. And you know, I used to call Mr. Hennigan, which was Charlie Hennigan. Mr. Charlie Toller, I used to call him Mr. Toller. I addressed those guys as Mr. So I addressed it Billy Cannon, Mr. Billy. He told me, he said, no, man, don't call me no Mr. Man. I ain't as old as them guys. Just call me Billy. I'll never forget that. Very good, fond memory of Billy Cannon. And to know that when they started the league out, Mr. Hunt started. That's why they got a Lamar Hunt trophy every year, because it was him who started the American Football League. And just to show you the kind of money that he was spending, they asked his daddy. You know, people say, who is Hunt? Lamar Hunt. All the Hunt tomato paste, the Hunt ketchup, all the stuff you see in the store called Hunts, that was them. And they was billionaires back during the 1960s up in Dallas. That's why he had to form his own football league, because when the NFL came to Dallas, they didn't want him to be the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, which was the new NFL franchise that was coming to Texas, which was coming to Dallas. It wasn't coming to Houston. And they wasn't named no Dallas Cowboys. That's something they added on to it. But I'll get in that into another date. But back to the AFL and Mr. Hunt, his son, Lamar, which now his grandson now is Clark, is running the team now. His son is running the team. But they asked Lamar Hunt daddy back in 1960, say, your son lost $100 million trying to bring his own his own professional football league in. And Mr. Lamar Hunt daddy looked the cameraman into his face just like I'm looking at you, and say, well, if that's all he lost was $100 million, all I got to tell him, he got another 100 years to live. Now that's strong. That's how much money the Hunt family had then, before they even went to Kansas City with the team. And the teams that started was quite natural. The Dallas Texans moved to Kansas City. Houston Oilers moved to Tennessee. The Boston Patriots moved to New England because the owner couldn't survive. And then you had the Denver Broncos, which stayed in Denver, but they changed ownership a couple of times. But they stayed in Denver. And then you had the Boston Patriots, changed ownership. The owner couldn't hang, so the new owner took the team out of Boston and moved to New England to Foxborough. And then you had the New York Titans, which was in New York. They couldn't hang because the Giants had all the money, and they couldn't hang, so they couldn't survive. So they had to move out of New York and move to the Meadowlands and became the New York Jets. And then you had the Buffalo Bills, which was Mr. Ralph Wilson. He and Mr. Adams and Mr. Hunt was the only one survived. And Mr. Wilson had the Buffalo Bills. And a new owner came in from the Los Angeles Chargers. He took the team and moved it to San Diego. And now you see they back in L.A. Well, that's where they started from. And then you had the Oakland Raiders, which the Oakland Raiders was owned by Al Davis' mother. Al Davis was the commissioner of the AFL before they merged. That's why him and Pete Rozelle couldn't get along, because when they merged, they couldn't have but one commissioner, and that was Pete Rozelle. That's why Al took over the team that his mother bought, that he bought for his mother, which was the Oakland Raiders, and that's why the Raiders are still part of the Davis family. But those are the teams that survived. And to know that I worked around all of those teams. Every year I worked the 60 season that they won in Houston in 3rd Ward at Jefferson Stadium. The 61 season, they won it again, but they had to travel to Los Angeles. But the 62 season, which was my last season, and it make it such a historical season because it was the last season that the Dallas Texans played in Dallas before they moved to Kansas City. And they played the championship game between the Dallas Texans and the Houston Oilers. And that's still in the history book, y'all, because they played 6 quarters before Ron Stenerud kicked a field goal for the Dallas Texans, and the Dallas Texans won. It was the first time me and Curtis got an opportunity to be around the winners' locker room, because the first year the Houston Oilers won and the Chargers lost, so the losing team didn't celebrate. But that year after next, the 62 season, that's when the visiting team won, and we worked for the visiting team, me and Curtis Boyd. We didn't know what they were doing. They were shaking it up. We did just show you how we was kids, man. We're only, I think I was about 13 at that time. And we see them shaking this champagne up. We ain't never heard of champagne. We see them shaking this bottle up, and foam come out the bottle, smoke come out when you pop the top. Man, and we thought that was such excitement. And they had so much champagne in that locker room, man. It was unreal. The game was a history game because they played 6 quarters. It was the first time I ever heard of sudden death. And to know that me and Curtis Boyd was part of history, man, that's amazing, man. And I say that because of his wife that Curtis have left and went on into heaven. And his wife, which is Rosalind Trimmer Boyd, and his daughter, they needed to know this, man, about their daddy and her husband. Curtis and me worked those games together. And to see how they eventually merged in to the NFL and to work around these. And one thing that I learned that will stick to me to the day I die, when the championship game, that first championship game when they played against the Los Angeles Chargers, Jack Kemp was a quarterback. A lot of people, who is Jack Kemp? He the one that ran for Republican president. And Sid Gilman was the coach. Sid Gilman was a real professional football coach because he used to coach the Los Angeles Rams before they fired him. That's why he was coaching the Los Angeles Chargers, because he had a reputation in L.A. And he had more experience. In fact, on his staff, he had Chuck Noll. So you know who Chuck Noll is? That's the one that used to was the coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers when they won all them Super Bowls. Well, he worked for Sid Gilman. And Sid Gilman was a nonsense coach. He was kind of like Coach Patterson. He didn't take no mess. He didn't smile. He didn't laugh. Everything was strictly business. And I always thought Coach Stram, Hank Stram, which was the Dallas Texan coach, and later on won the Super Bowl IV for the Kansas City Chiefs. He was a coach like Coach Tankersley. He would smile and laugh and play with the kids, play with his players, but then he also was about business too. But he did joke and play with the players like he was one of the fellas. And anyway, working for Sid Gilman, this game the Houston Oilers played the Los Angeles Chargers. Jack Kemp, Paulo, they was the star players for the Los Angeles Chargers. In fact, for the Houston Oilers, as you see, I am dressed with Oilers because I appreciate Mr. Adams and what he done and the life I played in being the first water boy for the Oilers. And quite naturally, you know about Billy Cannon, you know about George Blanda, you know about Charlie Hennigan, and you know about what you might not know about is Mike Hite, who owned Mike Hite Chevrolet out there off of Katy Freeway, where he used to play defensive back for the Oilers. And they call a timeout. See, and during them days, football players ran their own plays, especially George Blanda. Nobody told George Blanda what to do, not even Bud Adams didn't tell George Blanda what to do. And he was the owner. It was Mr. Blanda. And Mr. Blanda had more experience than any of them other guys because George Blanda used to be the field goal kicker for the Chicago Bears. He had worked for Papa Bear. And Papa Bear's the one who started the NFL out of Chicago. But it's history, y'all. You look at football every Sunday, you need to know something about what the hell you're looking at. Other than getting pissed off because your team didn't win. Learn the history about the game. Maybe some of the players don't even know the history about the game. But I'm giving you the history. I'm not giving you all the history on the NFL. But I know the history on the AFL. And to watch them merge in the early 70s was like a breath of fresh air to know that this is history, man. I have been part of history. And I never forget that game, that championship game. Mr. Blanda called, the Houston Oilers called a timeout. Everybody on the Chargers side, which I was working, they got up. Even the guys on the bench got up to the sideline. And I'm asking the trainer for the Chargers, who is my boss, what's going on? And he telling me that they sending in a play for George Blanda to run. And can't nobody tell George Blanda how to do something. So they trying to see how George Blanda going to react. And trust me, here's my right-hand guard, man. This is the honest God truth. They didn't show this on TV. And the AFL, they only have any TV rights. The only rights they had was ABC, and ABC had to do them because they couldn't do the NFL game because that was exclusive NBC and CBS. And they called a timeout. And Mr. Blanda walked over to the bench. I could see it from the other side of the field. Mr. Blanda walked on the other side, got out of the huddle, walked on the edge of the bench of the Houston Oilers side, and got in front of Mr. Rinker's face. I could see it looking clear as day on the other side of the field. And he got his finger and whoa! And you could see Mr. Rinker's head go back. And I said, oh boy, and all the guys on the Chargers started laughing. Sid Gilman got pissed off during them days they used to have a clipboard. He got so pissed off, he threw them clipboard at some of them guys and said, if any one of you buttheads do that to me, y'all don't have to worry about catching the plane coming back with me. and the team, because your ass can catch the bus as far as I'm concerned, you can be walking back to LA because you ain't riding on the plane with me and my team. Not if you disrespect me like that. The bench got quiet. They sit down. I'm steady looking. Then when George Blanda came out of timeout, that's when the television station might have showed this. He came out of timeout. And he came back and threw a long touchdown pass to Charlie Hennigan. I never forget it, man. To the day I leave here. And Mr. Renkers started running off the bench, Coach Renkers. The same man he flipped the bird to, almost poked him in the eye. Ran off the bench and started hugging and kissing George Blanda. At 13 years old, I don't see how you can kiss a man who flipped you the bird and almost poked your eye out. So I'm asking the coach, and not the coach, the trainer who I'm working for. Sir, and I'm always calling him Mr. Did Mr. Blanda flip Mr. Renkers the bird? He said, yeah. He says, look at here, son. I want you to remember this as long as you live. I ain't forgot it yet. He told me, he said, as long as you winning, don't nobody care what you do. As long as you winning, you can do what the hell you want to do. And I remember today. And I apply it to everyday life. As long as you making money, don't nobody care what you do. As long as Michael Jackson making money, didn't nobody care. As long as Bill Cosby making money, didn't nobody care. As long as James Brown was making money, didn't nobody care. As long as R. Kelly was making money, didn't nobody care. As long as Deshaun Watson was doing that old crazy stuff he was doing down here in Houston, didn't nobody care. Because he was winning. But once you ain't winning, it's all over, baby. And I never forget that. My exciting days with the Houston Oilers and Mr. Adams. It was just a breath of fresh air at Jefferson Stadium. That to see that stadium today change from Jefferson Stadium to Robertson Stadium to TDEC Stadium the University of Houston have now. The same property. The same ground. And to see, because see, when Mr. Adams came here in 1960, wasn't no Astros, wasn't no Houston Rockets. It was the first professional team to come here in 1960. And the reason why Mr. Adams called it the Oilers, because Houston was known for oil. We wasn't known for no space, because there wasn't no such thing as a space center out here yet. Only thing that Houston was known for was oil. We was a big, spacious city that didn't have the population that we had today, but we didn't have all these murders and killings and like we got today. And to show you how racist they was during that time. If you were black and you went to a Houston Oilers game in 3rd Ward, you had to sit in the end zone, y'all. No, they didn't let blacks sit with white folks unless they were poor white folks out there in the end zone. No matter how much money you had, you could only sit in the end zone if you were black. First black player on their team was John White that came out of TSU. That I remember seeing. And to know that how racist Houston was during them days. And now they got a black mayor, a black police chief, a black basketball coach, a black baseball coach that then led them to a World Series, a black police chief, a black athletic director, who I'm a good friends with, Mr. Andre Walker. Boy, God is good, man. I have watched this city grow just like I watch kids grow. We wasn't no metropolitan city. We were like 13th. Way behind Dallas. Way behind Cleveland. And to watch the city grow, and get away from some of his racist ways. We still got a bunch of racist ways, but they wasn't as bad as they was back during them days of the Jim Crow law. So I enjoyed telling you guys this. I will continue. Somebody, well, when you gonna write a book? I don't too much care about it. I mean, I let somebody else write a book about it. Let them make the money. Because one thing about it, people all this money. Yeah, I ain't never seen a Brink truck follow behind a hearse. And what I'm trying to say, you ain't finna take a damn thing with you. I remember the richest man in the country was buried right here in Houston, Texas. Mr. Howard Hughes, who owned all the Las Vegas Strip, 90% of it. And when they buried him right here in Houston, it was raining. I was working at KYK. It was raining and cold that day. And they didn't have it at a church. They had it at the gravesite. First time I ever seen a gravesite funeral. They didn't have all this cable TV like you got today. But they sure had the major three networks, NBC, CBS, and ABC. And the rest of the world came out to mourn, to watch this funeral of this great Houstonian who made to be a billionaire out in California and Las Vegas. And owned studios and everything else out there on the West Coast. And when the preacher came, it was one of Mr. Howard Hughes' friends. He wanted him to preach the funeral. And it was on the gravesite. It was raining and cold that day. And he got out the limousine. And people was holding an umbrella over his head. He said, I could talk for days about some of the things that Mr. Hughes accomplished. But I'm going to make this short. I'm going to make it sweet. And I'm going to make it straight to the point. You come here with nothing, you leave here with nothing. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Let's go home, everybody, and get out the rain. And that was it, partner. That's all this man had to say. They had television cameras, microphones, and putting it in the man's car. The man in the limousine took out with the microphone and all, hanging from the limousine window. And they asked him later on the Johnny Carson show, why was the sermon so short? He said because he been knowing Mr. Hughes as a kid. They were raised up together, and this is the way Mr. Hughes wanted his funeral to go down. He didn't want everybody to be moaning and groaning and all this shit. He said no, he wanted straight to the point, let everybody know whatever you make here on this earth you call money, you're not going to take 1 cent with you when you leave this earth. Thank you. God bless you.